Have you ever noticed how some people reach old age with a long list of years behind them, yet very little life inside them, and how others, even in their final seasons, seem vividly awake, present, and full? I am 101 years old, and if you ask me what longevity truly means, I will tell you this plainly. It has never been about counting how long I stayed alive. It has been about how deeply I stayed in life. I have watched men cling desperately to years they no longer knew how to live. I have seen them measure their worth by birthdays survived, not moments felt. And I have also seen something rarer, men with fewer years who carried more life in a single afternoon than others managed in decades. That contrast taught me everything. For a long time, I believed longevity meant endurance. Endure pain, endure decline, endure time. Add years, no matter the cost. But age has a way of correcting illusions gently, then firmly. Somewhere along the road, I learned that survival alone is not living. Breathing is not presence. Time passing is not meaning. What matters is whether your days still contain curiosity, whether your mornings still invite you forward, whether your relationships feel alive rather than maintained, whether your body, even with its limits, still feels like a place you inhabit rather than endure. Aging will take things from you. That is not cruelty, it is reality. Strength fades, speed leaves, certainty loosens its grip. But something else becomes possible if you allow it: depth, clarity, a quieter joy that does not depend on applause or ambition. This is not a story about extending life. It is a story about filling it. And if you're willing to listen, I will tell you what I learned, slowly, honestly, about how to add life to the years you are already living. For many years, I believed longevity was something you defended. You guarded it with caution, routines, and restraint. You avoided risks. You counted habits. You treated time like a fragile possession that might shatter if mishandled. And so I lived carefully, sometimes wisely, sometimes fearfully, thinking that survival itself was the highest achievement. What no one tells you when you are younger is that fear can keep you alive while quietly draining the life from your days. I saw men who did everything right, yet lived as if the world were already closing in on them. They avoided effort, avoided conflict, avoided joy that felt too loud or uncertain. They were adding years, perhaps, but they were shrinking their lives to fit inside them. There is a subtle difference between preservation and withdrawal. Preservation is caring for life. Withdrawal is retreating from it. I confused the two for a long time. When people speak about adding years to life, they often mean extending function at all costs. More procedures, more rules, more monitoring, more waiting. The body becomes a project to manage rather than a companion to inhabit. Time stretches, but experience thins. Days become longer and emptier at the same time. I lived through that phase. I remember waking up with no urgency to the day, only obligation, eating because it was time, moving because I should, speaking carefully, cautiously, afraid of wasting energy or making mistakes. I was alive, but barely engaged. That is when I realized something unsettling. You can survive your life long before it ends. Adding years without adding life creates a strange numbness. You are present but not participating, safe but not fulfilled, protected but not connected. And eventually, the question begins to whisper, what exactly am I preserving this for? The turning point did not come from a crisis or diagnosis. It came from boredom, a deep, heavy boredom that no rest could cure. I had protected myself from harm so well that I had also protected myself from meaning. I began to notice the men around me who felt different, not younger, just more alive. Their bodies carried wear, yes, but their eyes were alert. They still argued, still laughed loudly, still changed their minds. They had opinions that evolved instead of calcified. They asked questions. They cared. They were not chasing youth. They were practicing presence. That is when I understood the first great secret. Life does not withdraw from you because you age. It withdraws because you stop meeting it halfway. Adding life to years begins with participation, choosing to remain in relationship with the world, even when it becomes inconvenient, even when it requires effort, even when comfort tempts you to shrink. There is dignity in adaptation, but danger in retreat. Aging asks you to adjust your pace, not abandon the journey. I learned to stop asking, how do I last longer? And start asking, how do I stay awake? Awake to people, awake to change, awake to discomfort that teaches rather than damages. Vitality is not loud energy. It is responsiveness, the ability to feel touched by what is in front of you, to be moved, to be curious, to care. When you stop caring, you may still live, but life stops living through you. Adding life to years also means accepting limits without letting them define your identity. I could no longer move as fast, but I could move more deliberately. I could no longer do everything, but I could choose what mattered. Loss, I discovered, sharpens priority if you let it. There is a temptation in old age to reduce yourself to what remains, to say, this is all I can do now, and treat that statement as a closing door. But limits are not conclusions. They are boundaries that invite creativity. I learned to replace force with attention, speed with intention, quantity with quality. A single conversation fully inhabited became richer than a dozen rushed ones. One meaningful task completed with care mattered more than many done mechanically. This is how life returns, not by expanding outward, but by deepening inward. Another illusion I had to release was the idea that joy belongs to the young, that delight is childish, that seriousness equals wisdom. Nothing could be further from the truth. Joy is not frivolous. It is a sign of engagement. It means something reached you. The men who lose joy early age faster than their bodies require. They harden, they narrow, they become efficient but hollow. I decided deliberately to stay reachable, to let beauty still interrupt me, to let humor still disarm me, to let affection still matter. That decision changed everything. Adding life to years also means refusing to outsource meaning. No title, role, or legacy can substitute for lived presence. You cannot delay living until conditions improve. Time does not reward patience with guarantees. It only offers moments, one at a time. I stopped waiting for the right energy, the right mood, the right season. Those never arrive on schedule. Meaning is built from imperfect days accepted fully, not ideal ones postponed endlessly. I learned to meet each day as it was, not as a test, not as a threat, but as an invitation. Some days were quiet, some painful, some ordinary. But even ordinary days can be inhabited deeply. Longevity, I discovered, is not something you win at the end. It is something you practice daily by choosing engagement over withdrawal, curiosity over fear, presence over preservation. And once that shift happens, something remarkable occurs. Time stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes a companion, not generous, not cruel, just honest. In the next part, I will tell you how purpose, connection, and dignity, especially in limitation, became the true measures of a long life for me. As the years thinned my strength, something unexpected grew stronger, my sense of direction. When youth fades, distractions fall away. You stop chasing every open door and begin listening for the one that actually matters. This is where many men misunderstand aging. They think purpose shrinks with capacity. In truth, purpose clarifies when excess falls off. For most of my life, I associated purpose with productivity, with output, with being useful in visible ways. I believed that if I could no longer do as much, I would inevitably matter less. That belief quietly robs many men of dignity long before their bodies fail them. Purpose is not volume, it is alignment. In later years, I learned that purpose is the reason you rise from a chair with intention. It is the reason you listen fully when someone speaks. It is the reason you still choose care over indifference. None of these require youth. They require presence. Connection became the true currency of my days, not the number of people I knew, but the depth of attention I gave them. When you stop rushing, you notice how hungry people are to be seen, to be heard without interruption, to be acknowledged without being evaluated. Adding life to years means learning to give your attention generously. Attention is the rarest form of respect, and it costs nothing but willingness. I discovered that even when my body offered less, my presence offered more. There is also dignity in accepting help without surrendering agency. Many men resist this. They confuse independence with isolation. But dignity does not come from doing everything alone. It comes from participating honestly in the reality of your life. I learned to say, I need help without apology, and also to say, I can still contribute without defensiveness. Both are true at the same time. Life is relational by design. Refusing that truth in the name of pride is not strength, it is exile. Another quiet transformation happened when I stopped measuring myself against my past. Nostalgia can be a refuge, but it can also become a prison. If you only honor who you were, you will resent who you are becoming. I chose instead to ask a different question. Who can I be now, honestly, with what I have? That question unlocked creativity. Limits stopped being insults and became invitations. I could no longer lift heavy things, but I could lift conversations. I could no longer travel far, but I could travel inward with clarity. I could no longer multitask, but I could focus completely. Focus, I learned, is a form of vitality. Curiosity also became essential. Aging tempts you to believe you already know enough. That is when life quietly slips past you. I kept asking questions, not to challenge, but to understand. New ideas kept my inner world flexible. Rigid minds age faster than bodies. There is also courage required to remain emotionally available. Many men close their hearts as protection. Loss accumulates. Grief piles up. Withdrawal feels safer than vulnerability. But numbness is not peace, it is absence. Adding life to years means choosing to feel, even when feeling includes sadness. Grief is not a failure of resilience, it is proof of connection. I let myself mourn what I lost without turning that loss into bitterness. Feeling fully kept me human. I also learned to forgive myself for not becoming everything I once imagined. Regret is heavy when carried indefinitely. Reflection is useful, self-punishment is not. I took responsibility where needed, made amends where possible, and released the rest. You cannot inhabit the present while dragging every unfinished version of yourself behind you. Time does not ask for perfection, it asks for honesty. There is a quiet joy that emerges when you stop performing for outcomes, when you speak because it is true, not because it persuades, when you help because it is right, not because it is noticed. That joy is stable. It does not depend on applause or progress. I found meaning in small rituals, morning light through a window, a chair placed just right, a conversation completed without hurry. These were not substitutes for ambition, they were refinements of it. Life became less about accumulation and more about attunement. Attunement is the ability to sense what matters now. This is what younger men often misunderstand. They believe life expands through addition, more roles, more achievements, more experiences. In later years, life expands through subtraction, removing what no longer serves clarity, letting go of noise, choosing depth. And here is the paradox. As my world simplified, it felt richer, less crowded, more inhabitable. I was no longer sprinting through my own days. I was living inside them. A long life, I learned, is not one that avoids endings. It is one that remains engaged until the end arrives naturally. Present, curious, connected, dignified. Longevity is not about outrunning time. It is about walking with it, without resentment, without fear, without withdrawal. In the final part, I will tell you what remains when everything unnecessary falls away, and how that understanding reshaped the way I face the years I have left. At 101, I no longer believe life is meant to be conquered. It is meant to be inhabited. What remains after ambition quiets and strength softens is not emptiness, but truth. And truth is lighter than we imagine. I no longer measure my days by what I produce or prove. I measure them by whether I was present inside them, whether I listened without rushing, whether I chose engagement over retreat, whether I allowed the day, however ordinary, to reach me. Adding life to years does not require extraordinary circumstances. It requires attention, care, willingness. It means refusing to disappear from your own life just because the pace has changed. It means letting go of who you were without abandoning who you are becoming. There will always be loss. There will always be limits. But limits are not the opposite of life. They are the shape life takes at different stages. When you stop fighting that truth, dignity returns. If you remember nothing else from what I have shared, remember this. Longevity is not something waiting for you at the end of time. It is something you practice now. in how you speak, in how you listen, in how you remain open instead of armored. You do not need more years to live deeply. You need more presence in the years you already have. I am not afraid of time anymore. It has taken much, yes, but it has also revealed what matters. And what matters has never been quantity. It has always been quality, meaning, connection, aliveness. That is the secret I learned too late to use for decades, but not too late to share. And if you choose it sooner than I did, you will discover that a long life is not measured by how long it lasts, but by how fully it is lived.